Investigation Cast.
In our previous episodes, we've discussed Richard Kuklinski's claims of murder, dismemberment, and disposal of hundreds of victims. In today's episode, we'll take a look at the murders that Kuklinski was convicted of, as well as his eventual downfall as a mob hitman and, according to his claims, serial murderer. In addition to this, we'll discuss some interviews that his family participated in to better understand how his family was left in his murderous wake. Welcome to another episode of The Cabinet of Dr. Mystery. I am your host, Dr. Mystery.
I tried to create living zombies.
Reports that have been made by credible observers of relatively incredible things.
God, give me strength.
All I gotta do is relax, and they'll take me to their death.
Last chance to evacuate Earth before it is recycled.
This is a wicked, wicked world.
We are all evil in some form or another.
Welcome to another episode of The Cabinet of Dr. Mystery. I am so excited to be back, bringing you some good content. This is not officially Season 3 yet. We haven't quite started Season 3, but I'm excited to get going on that. But it's amazing and exciting and invigorating to be back and be recording a little bit. Don't have much of a studio set up right now, but it does the trick. It's a nice little spot in my apartment. Gotta do that indie style. Y'all know what it is. So we dropped a Halloween episode not that long ago. We're going to drop this Kuklinski episode, and that is going to finish off all the leftovers that we had from the last season. And we are going to start Season 3 fresh here real soon. Really excited to conclude this long-running series of Richard Kuklinski. I apologize for such a large gap in between there, but as I said before, personal issues. Sometimes personal emergencies and family issues take precedent over other things in life. But that's just being an adult. So, we are going to kick the episode off right, just like I did in the Halloween episode. We're going to do some dabs. That's right, kids. Say no to hugs and yes to drugs. What I used to do in the previous seasons was I would go outside in the backyard, I would smoke a joint, and then I would come back in and I would record while I was drinking a beer. Now what tends to happen is I don't really have enough time in my other commitments to just get plastered like I used to. When I would record an episode, I would just get drunk and just record. But now I'm mainly getting high and recording. I'm finding that it's easier for me to record this, to record during the day, and then that way I can, do other things with my day instead of recording late at night and getting drunk, and this is all that I'm doing. So I am drinking beer. Don't think otherwise. I do drink beer, but not as frequently. So you'll notice that I've been using cannabis in the podcast more regularly. I believe when I first started that cannabis either wasn't quite legal in Canada or it had just become legal. So I wasn't consuming cannabis while recording. I was normally going outside and consuming cannabis, smoking a joint, or you're using my vape or something like that, and then coming back in and recording while drinking a beer. Now I'm finding that, myself doing a bit of work within the cannabis industry, I'm becoming more and more comfortable using cannabis in a public setting. Not necessarily outside in front of a bunch of people, but more so this, where I'm more comfortable divulging that I use cannabis on a regular basis. I don't know. If you pay attention to the show, though, there are several logos that we have out that have pot leaves in the center, and I do talk about cannabis frequently. So, I don't know. I'm just trying to say, I'm getting more comfortable, and I don't know. I like to share my passions. That's why I started this podcast, because a lot of my friends are tired of me sharing true crime knowledge and mythology and folklore and all this sort of stuff. But in this format, they seem to love it. as opposed to me just being at a party and be like, hey, bro, you ever read about Mothman? So I will be consuming beer in quite a few of these episodes, but you'll probably see me consuming cannabis more often, or I guess you'll hear me. Maybe in the future, I've played around with the idea of doing a video podcast, but I'd like to have like a bit of a nicer setup. My room isn't that great. I do have a lot of cannabis paraphernalia, but that's about the coolest thing in my room right now besides me. So maybe if I get like a little bit of a better setup, we can start doing some live video shows. We did do a really cool one for Halloween last year, and that was a lot of fun. So I'd like to do a few more of those, but bear with me. We're starting to get back into the swing of things. Hopefully most of my personal issues and my health issues are behind me, but I think I have rambled on for quite a while. So before I do another dab hit, which we know is coming, let's get into these convicted murders, these murders that Kuklinski was actually convicted of. So a lot of people, I think I addressed this in one of our previous episodes, but a lot of people question the accuracy of Kuklinski's claims. A lot of people say that he basically found these news articles and he twisted them to fit his own narrative. And then when he was in these interviews and he was giving these exclusive interviews to HBO and to Phillip Carlo, that he twisted these things to make himself bigger, to increase his reputation. So a lot of people doubt the accuracy and truthfulness, to be quite plain, of Kuklinski's claims. But, especially with Robert Pronge, I believe it's Pronge, but it's spelled Pronge in most articles. However, a lot of people believe that the story of Robert Pronge was completely fabricated by Kuklinski. Now, there is a little bit of contention. There is a little bit of disagreement that there is police records that show that there was a stakeout. They were watching Robert Pronge, that police or FBI were watching Robert Pronge, and they did have reason to believe that he had committed murders. Whether or not they believed that he was a hitman, I'm not entirely sure, but there was a reason that he was being watched. There was a sting operation to try to catch Robert Pronge as well. So, these crimes that we're about to dive into, these murders that we're about to jump into here, these are murders that he was actually convicted of, that Richard Kuklinski was charged and convicted for murdering these people. So, whether or not we believe everything that I've talked about in the last 2 episodes about Kuklinski, what is true is these murders here. This is actual factual proof that was in a court of law. So on January 31st, 1980, George Malaband was killed after he met with Kuklinski to sell several videotapes. Now, I'm assuming these were pornography tapes, as, if you've listened to the last few episodes that we've talked about him in, he did this pornography thing like full time. It started out as him copying tapes, and then it ended up him copying and selling tapes, and then it ended up him actually starting and creating pornography, like having actresses and actors come in and smash each other's bones out, do some weird shit, as I talked about in the last episode. Linda Lovelace, give that a Google, or don't, because that is not safe for work. Google at your own risk. Now, Mr. Malaband's body was found several days later, and it was stuffed in a 55-gallon drum. This is something that I'm not sure if Kuklinski did a lot of, but he does mention it a few times. It's believed that Mr. Malaband had been carrying $27,000, which Kuklinski took after murdering him. And it was determined that Mr. Malaband was shot to death. This happened in Jersey City, as far as I can recall. Now, on March 14th, 1980, Peter Calabro, which, he was a New York City detective, the article I found about the murder reads, Peter Calabro, a New York Police Department detective, was fatally shot near his home in Saddle River in 1980 in what authorities alleged was a hit ordered by Sammy the Bull Gravano, who was an underboss in the Gambino crime family. Now, in February of 2003, Kuklinski, who was, he's already serving 60 years to life for the other murders that he's confessed to, he confessed to this one and he pled guilty to murder. Now, on top of his 60 years that he received for all of these murders that we're about to discuss, he received an additional 30-year prison term because of him killing Peter Calabro. On July 15th, 1981, Louis Masquet attempted to make a pornography tape deal with Kuklinski. His partially decomposed body was discovered some 15 months later. Now, the medical examiner had determined that Masquet had been shot to death, but he also found ice crystals in the body's tissues. And this is something that they talk about in a lot of different articles, a lot of books, a lot of documentaries. And this is, this is how the coroner had determined that the body had been frozen because of the ice crystals that have been found in the body's tissue. And I do remember reading that if the coroner had waited any longer to operate to open the body up, they would not have seen these ice crystals. But the fact that these bodies were frozen, these ice crystals found in the body's tissue, this is what led to Kuklinski being called the Iceman, that infamous nickname that follows him around everywhere. Honestly, I don't even know if the Iceman really works for Kuklinski. It does, but the Iceman works for Kuklinski because of his cold demeanor. It's not necessarily because of him freezing bodies. It's more about his cold demeanor, his icy chill, his icy cold eyes, his icy stare. I don't see the Iceman being connected to, obviously that's why, because he froze that body. But if we look at the rest of these murders, he doesn't freeze a lot of bodies. That's really not his MO. If you look at his history, you could, he's not alive anymore. You can't ask him. But in these interviews, I'm sure that he said that he froze a few bodies, but it wasn't like he was freezing every single body. Anyway, the Iceman works because of who he is, not because of his methods of murder. On April 29th, 1982, Kuklinski murdered Paul Hoffman. Now, Hoffman was last seen on his way with $22,000 in cash to buy a prescription drug from Mr. Kuklinski. To my knowledge, Hoffman's body was never found. Now, Hoffman, we'll get into Hoffman in a second here. Now, on December 27th, 1982, Kuklinski murdered Gary Smith. Now, Gary Smith, he had been a member of a burglary ring run by Kuklinski, and Gary was given cyanide and then he was strangled, and his body was stuffed under a bed in a motel. The body of Daniel Deppner, who was another member of the burglary ring, was found the following year. Daniel Deppner had also been poisoned, and his body was discovered in a plastic bag near a tree in northern New Jersey. In several different murders, Kuklinski would offer the victim a hamburger laced with cyanide. This murder technique was one that he picked up from a man he described as a Special Force veteran turned ice cream hitman, going by the name of Robert Pronge. Robert Pronge drove a Mr. Softee ice cream truck. Now, in our last episode, I think I probably referred to him as Robert Pronge. From further research, I believe that it's pronounced Pronge, but you heard me struggle with it at the beginning of this episode, so I'm not even sure. According to Kuklinski, Robert Pronge was very influential in Kuklinski's methods of murder. Kuklinski was quoted as saying, he was extremely crazy. He'd go into these neighborhoods and sell ice cream to the kids, and then maybe kill one of their fathers. According to Kuklinski, Pronge said he was an Army Special Forces veteran trained in using explosives and poison. Pronge claimed to use his ice cream truck for surveillance and kill his marks using remotely detonated explosives or aerosol cyanide. So he would hide in his truck and watch his mark, and then he would press a button and blow them up from a distance. He would leave his truck for a moment, he would walk up to the victim, bump into them, spray it in their face, and then continue walking. Now, Pronge, as I said before, he was very instrumental in introducing Richard to the idea of freezing his victims. So Robert Pronge was the reason that he was called the Iceman. But, like I said just 5 minutes ago, it bothers me because he really didn't freeze a lot of his victims. August 4th, 1984, Robert Pronge was found dead with 2 fatal bullet wounds in the front seat of his Mr. Softee truck. In an interview, Kuklinski stated that Mr. Softee asked Richard himself to kill his wife and young son for him, which Kuklinski obviously declined because, remember, Richard has this set of morals that he won't kill women or children. Now, when Pronge, he began talking about poisoning an entire water reservoir, just to kill one family, that's when Kuklinski says he executed him. So here's another one of those really far-fetched tales that we see where Robert Pronge's body was found in the front of his Softee truck with a couple bullet holes in him. Obviously, that would have made the paper because that's very shocking, right? That someone was executed like that, point blank on the street, especially in an ice cream truck, like an ice cream man, right? Was executed in, someone's neighborhood. So it obviously would have made the news. Now, some people believe, like I said before, this could be one of these instances where Kuklinski read about Robert Pronge trying to kill his own wife and son, as well as his death in the paper. As I said before, a lot of people question the truthfulness of Richard Kuklinski's claims. Some people believe that this is one of the cases where Kuklinski read about Robert Pronge trying to kill his own wife and son, as well as, his own death in the paper, Robert Pronge being found in the front seat. So he read about all of this in the paper. And after reading about him, he twisted this story to fit a dark narrative that would amplify the authenticity, would amplify the, impressiveness of Mr. Kuklinski. Many people believe that even Richard's big mob hits are a complete fabrication as well. I'm not saying I agree or disagree that everything Richard said is true, but one thing's for sure, he is absolutely certainly a ruthless killer. Before murdering Pronge, the Iceman and Mr. Softee, they teamed up on a few occasions. An HBO documentary in 2001 found old film reels of Pronge and called him an Army demolitions expert, a claim verified by Paul Smith of the New Jersey Organized Crime Bureau, who stated, "It is our opinion that friendship led to Richard Kuklinski learning a lot about killing with different types of chemicals, including cyanide." Now, Kuklinski murdered people using multiple different methods, which is one of the reasons why police probably couldn't catch him right away. Like they probably were looking at all these different motives and they were like, oh, this is not the same guy, right? But with Robert Pronge introducing him to cyanide, this developed the interest of local law enforcement. After Gary Smith's body was discovered, a serious investigation began. Dominic Polifrone was responsible for putting Kuklinski behind bars. He spearheaded an undercover operation that spanned, by some accounts, over 6 years. Kuklinski was arrested after agreeing to help Polifrone, a federal agent undercover, murder a fictitious man. Dominic recorded Kuklinski on tape discussing the efficiency of murder by cyanide poison, saying, "It's quiet, it's not messy, it's not noisy. You can spray it in someone's face and they just go to sleep." On December 17th, 1986, after 30 years of killing for the Mafia, And just for the hell of it, Richard Kuklinski was finally caught. Individuals in law enforcement have claimed that throughout the several interviews that Kuklinski gave, over 13 cold cases have been solved. And, like I said before, after all of this, several years later, 1986, Richard was caught. In 2003, he did also plead guilty to the 1980 murder of New York City Police Detective Peter Calabro, as we said before. Before we finish the episode off here, I'm going to do another dab hit and crack a beer. Now, I think the one thing that Richard is truly remorseful for is pulling the wool over his family's eyes, deceiving his family for so many years, hurting the people that mean everything to him, the only people that mean anything to him, really. At the end of one interview that I watched, he says that he's hurt the only people that mean anything to him, and at the end, he's like starting to tear up, and he says that he wishes his family would forgive him, that he feels remorse for his family. That's the only thing that he is really remorseful for. So before we end the episode, I just want to talk about his daughter Merrick briefly. In one interview, she produced a clear plastic shopping bag. This bag contains all that Kuklinski has left her. So he passed away. All he left her was whatever was in this bag. So in this bag contained a black binder filled with memos from Trenton State Prison, medical reports, and envelopes of family photos. There are a few sheets of prison stationery, and there's a list of Richard's favorite songs. There's a 2-page hand-scrawled list of poisons and their fatal effects. Along with all of this were several of Kuklinski's sketches. One of them was a drawing of rats gnawing on a corpse, which we see that he liked to do, or he claimed that he liked to do this on the outside as just punishment, Mafia hits, and just a way of torturing and then, getting rid of the body, really, because the rats are going to eat it all. There was also a tattoo reading, Grim Reaper Behind the 8 Ball. There was a scene depicting a woman in a bikini praying to a black spider, and a self-portrait of his face with skulls all around it. There's also a card that Merrick had sent to her father, I believe while he was in prison, and it says, quote, "Remember, Dad, you always left a light on for me. That warm light still shines in my heart." In the article, Merrick told us a story about one time when she was sick in the hospital, and Richard dressed up as Santa for the kids in the pediatric ward. Merrick stated that he was extremely charming with neighbors and friends, even hosting regular block party barbecues. He loved to hang around the house and spend time with the kids. "He denied us nothing," she said. "He wanted his life to be like it was on television. He just didn't know how to get there." Now, that would be Richard's Jekyll side. Merrick also described the Hyde side of Richard. She described his rage as a vicious whirlstorm that was constant from when she was 5 until she was 22. In the interview she gave, she said, quote, "He was incredibly sensitive to any kind of slight. And according to Merrick, Barbara had a sharp tongue and she didn't back down." She said that occasionally he would say something like, "I'm the king of the castle," and Barbara would say, "You're the king of nothing." Merrick said that when it came to their arguments, that Barbara wasn't an angel herself, and, that Richard was very sensitive to any sort of slight. Once, Merrick recalls Kuklinski boasting, quote, "You know who you're messing with? I'm a hitman for the mob." So that's what he would say to his daughters. And he said to his daughters, if he ever lost control and he killed Barbara, he would have to kill his daughters as well. Merrick and her family also witnessed many drivers sharing the road with Kuklinski just in the wrong place at the wrong time. If any of these drivers cut him off or they just upset him in general, with the kids in the car, He would run these drivers off the road and beat the life out of them, and then he would continue on to home or church as if nothing happened. From my perspective, Marek appears to be one of Kuklinski's only confidants, one of the only people that he can confide in. He shared stories of his various murders, and he described in detail the difficulty in dismembering individuals. Like, from Marek's perspective as well, I think he was confiding in her and only in her. You could look at the lifestyle the Kuklinskis had and say there was no way that Barbara didn't know something was up. In fact, in a few interviews, she talks about the fur coat that he bought her. And also when Richard was, when they dramatically arrested him, they had her in the vehicle. With a swarm of cops descending on them, she talked about when she asked the police why he was under arrest, and then they replied, for murder. She already knew that he was a murderer. She had this idea in her head already that, yeah, I know he's a murderer. Did you catch him? I wanted this episode to be a shorter one that we, would just use to tie the series together. Like I've said before, a lot of the true crime community, as I've said several times in this episode, a lot of the true crime community doesn't entirely believe Richard's legendary tales. Either he was history's most prolific hitman and serial murderer, or he committed multiple murders over business deals and fabricated grand tales using articles he found in the newspaper. I'll leave all that with you to decide, but as always, we'd love to hear any of your thoughts or theories on the subject. This episode is produced by Death Hotel Creative, hosted by myself, Dr. Mystery. To view more and to grab your exclusive Cabinet of Mystery merch, visit us at notwhatwesay.com, check out our Instagram handle at Cabinet of Mystery, or our Twitter at Open the Cabinet. Please leave us a review if you enjoyed the show, and let us know what topics you'd like to hear in the future. You can hit us up either on the socials or at cabinetofmystery@gmail.com. If you'd like to leave us a voice message and appear in upcoming episodes, leave us a voicemail at anchor.fm/Cabinet of Mystery. For sources on this episode, please see the episode description. Thank you for listening, and please subscribe or follow for more episodes.